there's definitely a lot of guilt that goes on with, because like I said, I didn't know I didn't cause the accident. I wasn't the driver, but it was my vehicle. I chose to give the driver the keys and let him drive the rest of our trip that we were on. So there's definitely a lot of guilt because I affected so many people. It affected so many people's lives. My mom had to quit her job to stay home to be able to take care of me. Um, Stuff like just having to renovate our house, and now mom and dad are wanting to move when my dad retires, and always having to take me into consideration because of my needs and the things that come with this situation.
My guilt is wishing that everybody could be like me. Everybody could come in here and walk in here instead of being pushed in here or rolled in here. I mean, that's my guilt. My guilt is wanting everybody to recover and heal like me. I know it sounds corny, but it's true. It's true.
I think it's associated with the injury from the beginning. I think that guilt is there because it's something that I could have chosen differently, and it's not something that I wanted to happen by all means, but I think that for me it was that I could have just chosen not to do it, and I feel guilty that other people have to cater to me because of that.
After an accident such as this, a lot of times people feel guilty. I went out and I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I went against what mom and dad said, and I feel guilty because I broke my neck or I broke my back. I feel guilty because I had an argument with my wife, and when that happened, I stormed out of the house and I went swimming and I dove into the swimming pool and I broke my neck, and I shouldn't have done that. And so guilt has this way of, on the one hand, it can motivate us, but if we're not cautious about it, it can catch us spinning, where we don't get anything done because we feel so guilty. You may have feelings of guilt because you're not able to work anymore and provide for your family. You may have feelings of guilt because, wow, this accident happened to you, but it impacts everybody in your family. It impacts the friends. It impacts the people that you work with. And so you take on a huge amount of responsibility for something that really wasn't your fault. Even if people make choices in their life that are maybe not the smartest choices that they make, and it leads to this kind of an injury, you still didn't ask for this. You still didn't deserve it. You got it. I don't know any of us who don't have guilt about some things in our life, about choices that we've made.
I do, for sure. Some things, like the little things, I definitely feel guilty for asking. Like, I feel like a bother sometimes because I know it can be annoying, and but some things I know that I have to have help with, and I'm okay with that. But it's, like not being able to hold a cup and someone having to hold the cup for me. I think things like that is just upsetting, and it's annoying, and for others and for myself, because it's something that I want to do for myself. But some things I know that, I have to ask for help, and I have to voice what I need help with, and that's important.
I guess the biggest burden I feel I've put on my family is more on my mom, just because of her. Well, it's mom and dad, because at this point, my youngest sister, she's married and out of the house. And so at this point, they should be empty nesters, getting ready to enjoy my dad's retirement and everything else. And it's I feel a burden because the new house they're moving into, they're gonna have to make sure it's set up for me to live in and me to have my own space. They're doing what they can for me to have my own space if I'm still living with them.
I don't think I'm a burden to my family, but I do think that I had a lot of those thoughts, right, when the accident first happened, going through the, the balance part of it. I remembered when I first started, I needed my parents' help to help me sit back up in my chair one time, right? And that is something that is just, it's kind of humiliating in a way. It takes away your independence, and obviously it's going to be something new that you have to learn. But for me, that not being able to sit up in the chair by myself was kind of the one event that really signified that this was happening, right? That's the one event that really, in my mind, set in stone that, okay, there's no getting around this. We're going to have to figure something out. My parents have always been really good about helping me and really good about reassuring that they don't mind. I know deep down that they never would mind helping me if they can.
A lot of people feel like they're a burden, particularly if they have an injury that requires the family to do a lot of their care. I don't think it's abnormal to have that feeling. Most people are independent in their lives. Most people like being able to do things for themselves, and most people have a hard time asking for help. I think what you have to remember, though, is your family is there for you. People are in this for the long haul. And if the situation was reversed and it was somebody else in your family that had the accident, would you be there for them? Would you want to help them? A lot of people tell me, yeah, but it's different, because of course I would be there for them. I just don't want them to have to do extra for me.
Oh man, you never had depositories, never had catheters, had to have people watch me. Like, everything was checked, meaning I couldn't progress to the next level until I was cleared by somebody younger than me, if you understand what I'm saying. And the healthcare profession is predominantly made up of women. So me being a man, having to be told by somebody who's in their 20s, you can't do this without me clearing you. I gotta watch you bathe. Catheters inside of me. I never had all this stuff. So me being an alpha male, me wanting to do everything on my own without having to wait or rely on somebody to tell me that you're cleared, was hard.
I had a lot of trouble asking for help, but whether I asked for it or not, the fact was I needed so much help. Your body is still adjusting, so it felt like, I would be so embarrassed and miserable every time if I had an accident, number one or number two, I would have an accident. I would just cry. I would just completely melt down because I would be embarrassed that someone now has to come, do this, change me, wash me up. In the very beginning, both of my parents, my mom and dad, both learned how to participate in my care. I felt like, now the rest of their lives, they got to figure out how to manage me. And I remember I would hear in the background them, okay, who's going to be home by 6 to relieve the caregiver? Okay, and then I got to leave by such and such. And so you hear them constantly trying to arrange their lives around me. And it's like, damn, I should be able to take care of myself. So then I really didn't want to ask for help for anything because it's like I already need enough. I felt like I owed everybody something because they were all having to make sacrifices for me.
The help thing has always been an interesting point over the years of my time working in this area. A lot of people do not like to ask for help. They see it as a sign of weakness. I see it as a sign of connectedness. I don't know anybody who gets through life without help somewhere. And somebody once said to me, yeah, but what about the homeless person living on the street? I said, even the homeless person living on the street is usually dependent on another homeless person. Even the hermit living out in the woods is depending on the environment to help them in order to survive. Asking for help is a sign of strength. It is identifying for yourself what you can do on your own and what you cannot do on your own. That is taking control of your life as well. There's some things that you can do actually that would take some of the burden off of your family members. Can you take over the responsibility of managing the finances in the house? Can you be the one that pays the bills online? Can you be the one that sets it up if it's going to be an automatic bill payment? Can you be the person in the family that takes charge of what are we doing this weekend, and you're the one that's planning stuff? Can you be the one that organizes different events in the family? Or, if you have children who are in school and they need to have their schedules coordinated in terms of who's going to soccer and who's going to pick them up and who's got piano lesson and who's going to do all that, can you take over some of that kind of thing so that maybe your role is different in the family, for sure, but you are also taking responsibility. This can be as easy as, if you are somebody that requires full assistance, and when you get up in the morning, can you at least decide for your family what it is that you're going to wear so they're not having to make all the decisions? These seem like minor things, but everything that you are able to do for yourself, even if somebody's physically helping you, is one less thing that they have to do for themselves. I know that in families at times, in terms of meal planning, maybe you're the one that makes the grocery store list. Maybe you're the one that's going to plan for the week what everybody's going to eat or what the kids are going to have in their lunch. So any of those roles that you can take on, then by all means take on, because one more thing you do is one less thing they do. I think one of the hardest things that I've experienced in terms of working with people, particularly people who have survival guilt, and let's take this for an example. If I'm in an accident and I'm the one that's driving the car and one of my friends dies, there is a lot of guilt and a lot of sense of responsibility around that particular thing. And how do I move through that? The reality is that in situations like that, you still didn't ask for the accident. You still didn't go out that day and with meaning and purpose, I'm going to get in this accident and cause somebody else's life to be gone. And so what happens is that we get stuck in all of that. And that just perpetuates us staying in that same place. I think it's at points like that that we need to reach out to people around us to help us move through that. I do remember talking with a patient once whose friend was killed in an accident, and I asked him, would she want him staying in that place, or would she want him to move on in his life? And he thought about it for a while, and he said, she would want me to move on, but I feel sad about moving on. And I said, but moving on doesn't mean you're leaving them behind. This is somebody who is near to you in your life and who is dear to you in your life. And what would they want you to do? And so sometimes reframing it from your friend's perspective is a way to kind of move forward through this. Doesn't mean as you move forward that you forget them, but maybe you bring them along the ride with you. Anytime anybody starts feeling guilty, one of the things I like to find out is, why am I feeling this way? Is there something that's triggering that feeling? Am I going back in terms of my accident and sort of replaying that again and then playing out, oh my gosh, if I hadn't done that, then this wouldn't happen, or my family wouldn't be having to help me do this, or I wouldn't have lost my job, whatever it is. I think being able to sit in that for a few moments and really get a sense of, why am I feeling this way, or where is this coming from, is kind of important, because it allows us to get a handle on what's driving this and how do I move from that. At that point then, in terms of where guilt is, what can I do to uplift myself more? What can I do to give myself more control of my life? And I would start doing those things. For additional resources, please visit our website.